Extension Master Gardener for Wake County for just about 10 years now. And I joined, for those of you who don't know a lot about the program and what our mission is, we are volunteer educators trained by the university on urban horticulture to help residents improve their gardening practices in a sustainable way. And my interest was coming to the program to bring my background in water gardening, aquatic plants, and water quality. Now, my career background is research scientist, leading research and development of specialty chemical and polymer products. How did I get started? How did we all start this interest in water gardens? Well, back in 1984, my husband and I were tired of living in separate states. My husband is here, Dr. Bill DuPont, and he's joining us today. He is a professor at Meredith College across the street in the chemistry department. So in 1984, as I said, we needed to live in one state, one household. So we moved, careers moved us to western Massachusetts on a mountain, 6.5 acres of land on what used to be a peach and apple orchard. And it was a new construction house because the town wasn't very friendly to developers, and the builder bought the house, who bought the land, intended on building a development, but ended up building a single house on 6.5 acres of land. So this was the first house I've ever lived in, being a city girl. And we moved there, and there was this drainage pipe, that moving the water away from the gutters and rainwater, down the slope. We put in this drainage pipe, and it flowed in, drained into this ditch. And one thing about the water, the soil there, they have very high water tables, so that the water table, if you dug down probably 2.5 to 3.5 feet deep, you'd hit water. So we had this drainage ditch, this pipe, all this rainwater going into here. And over the years, I was just watching this. I was totally fascinated to see in this drainage ditch that frogs were coming and dragonflies were coming, and all these critters and plants were growing. And I said, I'll put on the hubby to-do list, get out there with your shovel and, dig a hole. Well, obviously, like many other things, that wasn't going to happen. So back in 1990, when we decided to put on a sunroom onto the house, at the end of the day when they had the heavy equipment in, I kind of persuaded with a little financial incentive for these people with the heavy equipment, could you go out and just dig me a hole in the ground that was, probably 16 to 20 feet across and 18 to 24 inches deep. And that was the start of our venturing into water gardening. So we had this hole in the ground, and I have pictures there. You're welcome to come up and look at the original pictures of this water garden that we started. So this hole in the ground, and then went out and bought some goldfish, put them in there, and within probably 2 hours, they were gone. Amazing. You put the things in, the herons will find it immediately. And, again, this is around 1990, and very few people had water gardens. If you couldn't go to a garden center and you couldn't find a pond installer. It just didn't happen. And it was at this time that we were invited over to one of my colleagues' home. They're a British couple, and they did English formal gardening. And we looked, and they had this little tiny, very formal pond. And it was like that in my heart. All the bells, whistles, fireworks went off, and I said, I want one of those. I have to have a pond. But it was never going to be a formal garden, because that's not the style we garden au naturel. As we say that, it's natural gardening, and our garden style is called Darwinian gardening. It's survival of the fittest, If it doesn't make it, it doesn't make it. We don't water, we don't treat, we don't fertilize. If it's going to make it, it's going to make it. So, and then it was shortly after we saw an ad in the newspaper at a garden center of a seminar on water plants. And so we went to the garden center and met a few people who had similar interests. And next thing we know, we were connected up to a garden center near the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, who was doing growing and propagating plants for water quality. and BMP's best management practices for soil restoration, and we got to know them. And the next thing that we know is that we are trading plants and forming a club, which was the Pioneer Valley Water Gardening and Koi Club, which is probably one of the largest clubs in the nation at that time. And next thing we know, we're leading this whole initiative of promoting water gardening and pond tours and club membership. And then that takes us to 2003. At the peak of our interest in water gardening, I accepted a position down here. And so after we sold the house in Massachusetts, Bill shows up with the 3 dogs, the cat, and everything in the car. And in the back of the car are tubs of our goldfish, our original lily that you've seen, the 25-year-old lily, and the goldfish. And I'm looking at these tubs and I'm saying to Bill, okay, we just bought this house here. We have no ponds, we have nothing. What are we going to do here with these tubs? And then we look out on the deck and there's this empty hot tub. So he said, okay, for now the fish are going to go into this hot tub and the plants are going to go in this hot tub, and that'll keep us until we get our other ponds installed. So, a few months later, we finally get around having one pond put in, but we kind of like that one on the deck. And then a few years later, we have another water garden put in. So we have one with 50-foot stream, we have one small one in the front of the house, and then in the back of the house, the one on the hot tub. It still exists today, 12 years later, as a water garden. So that's how we got into this whole thing. Now, because of water gardening was very, very new over the years, most of the knowledge came from practical experience and working with other people on aquatic plants, koi ponds, water gardens. And it was only when I come here that the universe conspired to say, put me in a neighborhood which happens to have a creek on it, which drains into Falls Lake, and a drinking water treatment plant close by that has a chemical discharge. And so that moved me into the whole area of water quality and water protection. So combining those two. So that's a lot of information about my background and how that got me here today on that. So with that, the purpose of today's talk is to talk about, I want you to leave here knowing how you can have a happy and healthy water garden and at the same time be protecting the environment. What you're not going to see today is a list of plants, to say, oh, these are the cultivars, these are the top 10 or 20 cultivars of water lilies that I'm going to go out now, go to the nursery center. That's not what you're going to see today. But I'm going to show you resources of which you can find more information on various cultivars and various plants on our very own ces.ncsu garden website. So to start out with that, we would say that the key to a healthy pond is the proper balance of plants. And so that the purpose of aquatic plants in water gardens is to protect the quality of the water, to provide beauty and interest, and to provide shelter for fish and other pond residents. And as you saw from some of the slides, if you put in a water garden, the fish and the nators will come. The frogs and dragonflies and insects, everything will come. Wanted and unwanted visitors to your pond will come. To achieve the balance of quality and beauty, you need to have the proper balance and variety of plants. And we categorize aquatic plants into 4 separate categories. The first is the submerged plants, which are called oxygenators. The second are floating plants. The third, marginal bog plants, and the fourth is the deep water plants. And we'll go through each of those and talk about what they bring in the balance and how to use them. Okay, if someone said to me, if you could only have one plant or one type of plant in your water garden, what would it be? My answer was, it's not going to be the pretty one. It's going to be the one that's most beneficial to the pond. And the oxygenators are the key plant to have in a water garden. The oxygenators feed exclusively through their leaves, taking up nutrients, and due to, in the daylight photosynthesis, they oxygenate the water. They are the workhorses of the pond. They keep the water clear, and they feed, as I said, on dissolved salts and nitrate wastes, and are one of the key plants to controlling algae. They also, because of their surface area being all leaves, they attract nitrifying bacteria, so it's coated with the bacteria. And also, I mean, they're like sponges. They absorb sediment and things that are flowing through. And if you go and pick up some of the oxygenators, they're going to look dirty and ugly. And then if you put them, rinse them off to see them, they'll, you wash off everything they've collected, and then they're green and pretty again. So that's the most important plant to have in your garden. And they grow and spread rapidly and may become invasive. And we're going to talk a lot today about invasive plants. Okay. The key oxygenator plants, the top three that we use in our ponds, are Anacris, hornwort, parrot's feather. And you'll see pictures of those. And at the end of the talk today, we brought, Bill was kind enough to go into our ponds and pull out plants of each type. So I have tubs of plants that you could come up and see at the end of the talk if you have more questions, and just to come and take a look. So we have samples of the Anacris, the hornwort, and the parrot's feather. Now, Anacris is used mainly, it's more shade tolerant, so it tends to grow deeper. So if you have a shady pond, Anacris would be your oxygenator of choice. If you have a sunny area, hornwort would be the oxygenator of choice. And then parrot's feather also likes sunny ponds. Now, to get the best combination, because of how these plants work, you would need best to combine them, to have a wide variety of plants in your ponds. Now,
how do they cope in the winter?
they fall to the bottom and they overwinter. All of the Anacris.
So do they continue oxygenating through the winter?
No, they become dormant. The Anacris and hornwort, unless it would be a really, really, really bad winter. I mean, it survived up in western Massachusetts for us. And the same thing for the parrot's feather. The parrot's feather is a water milfoil, and it's on the NC invasive watch list now, and you have to be really careful with all of the oxygenator plants. I mean, about 2 weeks ago, I was doing some consulting on how to control hydrilla, and I mean, hydrilla is an aquarium plant, and you could probably still go to a pet store and be sold hydrilla. And hydrilla has caused such a problem, even in the mountains in western North Carolina, of clogging ponds and streams and lakes. And fortunately, they've discovered that the sterile grass carp is the best means to control hydrilla. I mean, we know how koi go in and just massively eat everything, but we don't want to be introducing koi into our streams and waterways. So they've come up with using sterile grass carp. Again, there's only 1 or 2 herbicides that are used, and they're only to be used when it's absolutely necessary for boating docks and areas where people have to have access. But to be very, very careful, because these can become invasive plants. And even the Anacris, which is a type of Alodia, is closely related to an African type. It's a cousin, which again, you may be sold that if you go to buy aquarium plants. And it would be terrible to take that aquarium plant and put it in your pond and then have it get out and become invasive. Okay, here's an example. There are several different plants here. The yellow one in bloom is a yellow fringe. That is not. The Anacris is what you're seeing here on the green translucent. It does bloom. Let's see if I have a picture of it. Here's the Anacris in bloom with a little white bloom. And you can see there are 2 different types of plants here. The anapris has the thicker leaves and the hornwort has the very, very thin leaves. Now, oxygenators, there are several types of oxygenators that also exhibit allelopathic behavior from your chemical warfare by plants. So they put out chemicals to keep fish and other things from eating them, but they also deter other plants and algae. So they're used, we said the oxygenators are used to control algae growth because they suck, they're heavy feeders, they take a lot of the nitrogen and the fish waste out of the water, and but they also put out some chemicals to deter algae formation. The second most important plant in your garden are the floating plants, and these feed exclusively through their extensive root systems. They also provide shade and cover, and that also helps to deter the algae growth, and they protect the fish and wildlife because they're providing some shade. And as we'll see as we go through this, the ultimate goal for a healthy, happy environment is to have 60 to 70% of the surface area in your ponds covered. This way the fish can hide, the other wildlife can hide. It also tends to keep water temperature down and prevent algae formation because it's a little cooler, shadier, less photosynthesis happening, and pulling nutrients out of the water, and at the same time they're putting out these mildly inhibitive chemical warfare. Now, if you've ever had the free floating plants, the two most common, and I have examples here, we use both water lettuce and water hyacinths in our pond. Now, as you know, with water hyacinths, you may have read, it become terribly invasive in Louisiana and Florida. And I've always considered them so tropical. I've been overwintering them in my house for, 15 years, both in Western Massachusetts and here, and have always, had a really hard time overwintering the water lettuce and water hyacinths. And this year, I don't know how it happened, but a little bit of water hyacinth was left in one of our whiskey barrels in our vegetable garden, where we had some water plants, and to our great surprise, the water hyacinth overwintered. Little tiny water hyacinths. Now that's scary, because we were sure that that was never going to happen, and it did. And as we, face warming climates and milder winters, this can be a big flag. So it's important, we have to be responsible pond owners and make sure that our plants never get out into the wild, that they're properly disposed of when we pull them out of the ponds. So getting back to the water lettuce and the water hyacinths. Water lettuce are more shade tolerant. So if you have a shady garden, your plant of choice is water lettuce. If you have a sunny pond, your plant of choice is water hyacinths. And they put out beautiful blooms. Here's an example of a water hyacinth in bloom in our yard. They bloom for one day only. People have always said to me, well, how do you get them to bloom? Well, the key to getting water hyacinths to bloom is to crowd them. So clump them together. You can even wrap them with, fishing line. And that, when they feel that they're confined and now for their own survival, propagation for their own survival, they have to go put out a bloom, and that's how to force water hyacinths to bloom. They will grow very, very large rootstock, and they are great feeders. They take out tons and tons of nutrients from the water. They long roots, and they also act like sponges. So all the sediment that passes by, they're like pond filters. You pick it up and it's all this black gunk in it. It looks pretty disgusting, but they're doing their job. And water hyacinths are even being used experimentally in terms of water treatment because they absorb heavy metals. So they are great at absorbing toxins and heavy metals and providing great water quality control in your gardens. Okay, There are several different types of water hyacinths. What you saw there was what I call Louisiana hyacinths, and then dwarf water hyacinths have been, came into being maybe 10, 15 years ago, and we were propagating them, and they are being propagated down here now, and they are excellent for very small water gardens, because they will stay that size, and they will also put out very nice blooms. Okay, here's again a picture of one of our water gardens, and we have the hyacinths in bloom, and you can see the water lettuce among other plants. But again, even in a water garden, things grow, and they grow quickly. And so they can be, you see how invasive they can become in our own ponds. You definitely do not want to take any chance of letting these out of your water gardens. So dispose of them properly, compost them at the end of the year. You have to pull them out because these, again, will not survive in your ponds over the winter.
I have a question. What about birds? Do you worry about a bird picking one up and carrying it to another pond?
No, not at all.
Or to the stream, I guess, would be the concern.
And water lettuce, again, put out something that, again, allelopathic, fish won't eat it, and it's, if you get into chemicals, research on it, it is putting out something to keep things from eating it. We give away, getting back to oxygenators, we give away, we're always asked for our anaphyris to feed the turtles in the turtle rescue groups. But again, hornwort, not so much because of some of the chemicals in the hornwort, but anaphyris. And in terms of fish eating it, the fish will love, koi will demolish the rootstock on the water hyacinths, but they really don't want to touch the water lettuce. In terms of usage, getting on the oxygenators, you know, the amount of plants that you put in will depend on the size of your pond, how much sunlight it gets, and how many fish you have. So we typically say for oxygenators that you want one clump of anaphyris per square foot of surface area, and it has to be kept away. If you have koi, it has to be kept away from the koi because they'll eat it. In hyacinths and water lettuce, everybody comes to me and says, "Oh, can I have some water lettuce and water hyacinths?" Sure. How big's your pond? Oh, it's 3 feet. Well, how many do you want? And I'll say, well, they want instant gratification. But what you need to tell people is it's one plant per 8 to 10 square feet of pond surface, because look what will happen. I can put out 3 water lettuce or 3 water hyacinths in this large pond, and it will be covered by the end of the summer. And you'll be pulling it out by the wheelbarrow, as Bill can tell you. His goals of pulling it out by the wheelbarrow. This is another type of water lettuce, very pretty. There's other free-floating plants, duckweed, azolla. Fish will love to eat duckweed. I've tried to introduce duckweed into our whiskey barrels, again, where there's no danger of getting out to the environment, no real danger, and the goldfish, they just eat it up in the hot, in our hot tub, they just eat it up. Azolla, they will not, again, for the same reason of there's some chemicals in that azolla that they'd have to be really, really hungry. They will tend to avoid it. So if there's a duckweed problem, you just get some fish, and that will take care of that. Or you could use some other plants that have been shown to get rid of duckweed. Here's at the height, the frog is definitely enjoying his time in the duckweed.
Yeah, but the duckweed will cover thick if you don't have koi.
That's exactly
So
right.
don't ever introduce it if you don't have koi.
Exactly. You've gone around to ponds and lakes and streams that aren't moving, still water, and where it collects, so it will become terrible. So it's a real problem, duckweed. So use it, if you're going to do that, use it very, very carefully. Other floating leaf plants are pond lilies, in native the spatterdock, frog's bit, which again can be terribly invasive, the water hawthorn, which is a great plant. So there's a variety of plants that you could use. So again, remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep the water clean, and we're trying to cover the water so it provides protection and shade, and at the same time continue to absorb fish waste or just nutrient waste and prevent algae formation. Here's an example of frog's bit when it's in bloom, but this again, if it's in a still area, it will grow and become massive and smother things out. So it has to be used very, very carefully. This is an example of yellow fringe, and we call this the poor man's water lily. So people who have small ponds, this is the way to go. So very, very pretty, and it stays small. And another example is the water snowflake. And I had water hawthorn for about a year, and I was really turned on to this plant because it blooms in the wintertime. It's cold water tolerant. Unlike some of all the other free-floating or leaves on the surface that we've talked about, this one really wants to have its roots in water. So it's more similar to water lilies. But one year it was very, very cold, too cold, and also the koi got hungry, and that was the end of that plant. Between the cold and the hungry koi. And so I haven't tried it again. Now we have a third group. So again, the first group of plants, the oxygenators, feed exclusively through their leaves. The floating plants, the water hyacinths, the water lettuce, feed exclusively through their roots, absorbing the nutrients. The marginal or bog plants have their roots in soil. So they are gaining their nutrition through the roots in the soil. And their primary function is beauty and interest. Their secondary function is water filtration. You often find them at the edge or margins of the pond, shells in the water garden. They have to have their roots in soil. And say, okay, well, how deep should I plant it? We'll go through some slides on this, but it really varies. I mean, I've seen some books saying, well, it needs to be 6 to 12 inches or 18 inches deep. Yet I have lobelia that I have in outside the pond. I have some lobelia on the edge of the pond, and there's some lobelia inside the pond. That's the cardinal flower. And so it really depends. The plants tend to find the environment that they want to live in terms of marginal and bogs. But the key to remember what a marginal bog plant is, again, it wants its roots in the soil. It's going to absorb its nutrients from the roots in the soil, and its leaves stand straight up versus the other ones that we've talked about today. And again, they may become very invasive depending on which ones you use. Most common ones that we see here are irises, yellow flag and blue flag, sweet flag, cattails, purple thalia, lizard's tail. Right now the golden club is blooming in my pond. It's one of the earliest plants to bloom. So golden club is blooming right now along with the irises. And you know, yellow flag is now considered an invasive. I was just doing some consulting work on that last week onto what it means to control that in western North Carolina. So again, another thing that has gotten out, and it sad to say, but some of the leading causes of these plants, which are from Asia and Africa, some of them getting out into is through aquarium and water gardens and water garden hobbyists. Are saying, oh, this is nice, or they want to dispose of it, so they're going to just put it in a pond. Don't do that, because it's extremely hard. Once it takes hold, extremely hard to control. Here's an example of yellow flag harvest, and this morning I went out and clipped one for us to look at up close and personal. Again, they can be very, very invasive. if they're in extremely wet soil. You can grow them actually in the pond, in a bucket or a pot in the pond. And that's the best way to control them, in a bucket in a pond, and keep watching to make sure the bucket doesn't split as the roots grow. We've had many plants take hold because they've outgrown their pot, and then once that happens, they just take off. Especially if you have a dirt bottom pond. Here are some examples of the blue flag iris. And my blue flag wasn't quite blooming yet, but I have some of the similar ones that are shown here I brought with me today. Cattails, example of another marginal plant, and I think you can see the pickerel rush at the bottom. Again, cattails, they're very great on chemical warfare, so they've actually been used to help control algae and other things, other problems. But they can take off, and why they're so successful is because they're so good at chemical warfare. They're, being heavy feeders and then putting out their chemical toxicity or chemical inhibition. Another really nice plant, but that tends to get wild and run away is lizard's tail. I really like it. I give it away, but I tell you, be very, very careful with lizard's tail, because it will break out of its pots and start taking root and spreading. Here's another list which wants shallower water. The rushes, the horsetail. Again, I've had my best luck with cardinal flower, which is outside the pond or just on the pond edge. Here's an example of bloody dock. It didn't last long for us. We ended up moving it, and the year we had a drought, we lost it because we didn't keep it wet and happy. And here's horsetail. Again, that will spread. You got to keep it confined, keep it in that pot, and keep a good watch on it. But again, it's an excellent feeder. It's not only providing decorative interest, but we're interested in having plants that can really absorb up all of those nutrients to keep the algae down.
In Columbus, Ohio, the plant has become glyphosate resistant. I don't know whether you've had that problem here or not.
First, glyphosate should never be used in ponds and water. There's only one formulation that's even approved for being used around ponds, and that's rodeo. And that's due to the nature of the surfactant, the emulsifier, that's in the product. As I said, for the hydrilla work, and there's the fluoridone is the herbicide that is approved for use in ponds and lakes and streams, but again, only when it's absolutely necessary to immediately cut back to clear a waterway and boats and docks. So no glyphosate around ponds unless it's rodeo, and then you still be really careful to keep it away from the water.
I have seen horsetail take over gardens, though. It doesn't have to be in water. And it's one of the most aggressive plants I've ever seen in a garden. I don't know how you would get rid of it really without super chemicals.
And yet we've tried endlessly to grow it, and it's not done well for us. So
Don't ever plant it in your garden. It goes underground. It's an underground
This is
infiltrator.
on the agricultural research farm called the Waterman Farm, just outside of Ohio State University, and it was a real problem.
I'm not surprised. I mean, more and more we're seeing that these plants are becoming invasive and very, very hard to control. One of my favorite plants, which I've not been able to have grown here in our ponds, is the marshmallow. Again, it wants sun and part shade. It wants to be wet, but not sunk and deep and kept wet. So it's a beautiful plant. Does anyone have any experience with the marshmallow? I'd like to get some. Okay. What's semi-hardy in our zone is the pickerel weed. border hibiscus, the chameleon plant we can't get rid of for anything in our area, so I'll debate whether that is semi-hardy. I think it's evolved to be hardy, and then some. And I think for the most part, we'd have to have a really, really wicked winter to see the pickerel weed die. Here's an example of one of our water hibiscus. It's become one of my favorite plants. Again, it's in a pot sunk into our pond, and it provides great decorative interest. More pictures of the water hibiscus, the spider lily. Again, another one of my favorite plants. It blooms only for the day. It's probably a 3-day total window. You can see some of the chameleon plant, the petunia, in the background. Again, this is the pickerel weed. I adore this plant. And it is, again, one of the best feeders. So it really picks up those nutrients and waste products. This is the nasty one. My husband gets angry at me every single year when he has to go out and try to get rid of it. But this is spreads by rhizome. So by pulling it, you're only making it worse. You're breaking it off. The only way to get rid of this would be repeated spraying with rodeo. And we just prefer not to do that. It's, again, beautiful plant. It will turn very, very colorful in the sun. It has a wonderful fragrance, puts out a beautiful flower, and if you can keep it confined in a pot with no way to get near soil, that is the only way to work with that plant, to keep it out. I don't know how we're ever going to get rid of it. Okay, plants that people love but are not hardy. And I try it and then I lose them because I am selective of what I'm willing to haul inside. Some of the water cater, the purple taro, some of the elephant's ear, some of the umbrella palm, but yet I know people who have huge things of umbrella ponds in their upper ponds or near their ponds, and it lasts forever. And for us, we have not been successful in overwintering it outside. So for us, overwintering outside did work, but we have neighbors where it does. So it depends
Umbrella
on
palm are quite hardy for this area. We've had one up there near the visitor center for years. I've had them at home. And even dwarf papyrus is relatively hardy.
Okay, well,
And the regular sometimes survives, sometimes, but don't count on that one.
unfortunately, the umbrella palm and the papyrus haven't made it in our yard. We have a microclimate in our yard. We know that it's 7 degrees colder than here. So, that's probably the difference. Okay. Again, the taros, some are hardy, some are not, but some of the taros can become quite invasive. I have one that spreads by rhizome on the surface, and it is just putting out runners that long. And it's a beautiful, leaves get huge, it's absolutely gorgeous, I love it. It's easily controlled though, because the runners are on the surface and you can just pull it out. Now, interesting learning about the taros, I overwinter my plants, and I try to minimize the number of buckets that I have in my sunroom. So I had a bucket of water lettuce, and one of my friends wanted a taro, but after I pulled it out, there it is, she had said, too late, she wasn't going to put it in. So, okay, so bring the bucket inside, and I said, let me just, instead of having that bucket in there, let me just throw it in with the water lettuce. Well, within a week, I started to see that my water lettuce clump was getting smaller and smaller, and then I lost just about all my water lettuce, and I did research on it, and again, chemical warfare at work. That taro killed off the water lettuce.
If I can add something, elephant ears don't like being wet when they're dormant. They're actually hardy in this area, but if they're kept wet, they rot. So if you take them out of the water garden, you can sink the pots into the soil outside, and they'll survive the winter.
Now that's the ones that the bulbs.
Like the black magic right there,
Okay.
or any of the other elephant ears overall. Yeah.
Okay, it's good to know, because some of the bulb stock I know is not, but the tubers, some of the rhizomes
Yeah.
do fine.
And I got lazy. I just started putting mine in the basement. Putting the pots in the ground takes extra effort of burying them.
Uh-huh.
I just put them in the basement in the corner, and I don't even water them.
And here's another example. We've lost this because we didn't do what Chris just recommended. Again, water canna, don't ever try putting your regular canna in the water. It's not going to work. You're going to rot the bowl instantly. You have to use the certain type that's for water gardens. Again, the umbrella palm we talked about. Again, the one that was out there we lost. We talked a little bit about the different depths. Plants like different depths. Water lilies are about the deepest. Marginal bog plants just below the surface, down to 4 to 12 inches. So different depths for different plants. Keep them happy. Here's a picture of, you can see the marginal plants on shelves. And they used to build koi ponds where it was a step down. You know, you had a shelf. Well, you're just building a staircase for the heron to walk into. So you don't want to do that. If you're going to have koi or any fish that you value, the pond needs to be built steep down, no step in. And then you might see that one of the best ways to keep the heron out is fishing line. Okay, the jewels of the pond are your hardy water lilies. And these, again, the flower on the surface. So again, in terms of water treatment, they feed through the roots in the soil. They are heavy feeders, but to keep them blooming consistently, the recommendation is to put a fertilizer tablet once a month in for consistent blooms. But they are heavy feeders. We don't fertilize anything, so we make it rely on the nutrients in the water. Again, they only open for certain hours of the day, typically like 9 to 1 in our yard. They require 6 hours of sun, and they are the deepest. You can sink them 6 inches to 4 feet. And it only takes one water lily to cover a great deal of surface area. Again, they are probably one of the best plants to use to shade and provide protection. And they exist in a variety of colors. And I'm not going to go into cultivars because that's all available on the ces.ncsu.edu. There are over 50 varieties listed on that website. Here's an example of a hardy water lily in our pond, another one. And then, of course, there's tropical water lilies. These provide full sun. Some of them bloom at night. And one way to tell a tropical lily from a hardy is the edges. Tropicals typically have serrated leaf edges. Here's an example of a tropical water lily. And there's a night blooming one. You can clearly see the serrated edges on this one. And another one. And then, of course, the true jewels are your lotus. The lotus need a lot of sun, and they can be planted 12 inches to 3 feet, and they flower later than water lilies, and they have stems that are 2 to 5 feet, and their flowers last 3 days. On the slide, we'll run again if you haven't seen it. Bill has captured great shots of a lotus from its bud and the way it opens, and then going all the way to where you have the pod, the seed pod, which you can cut and for dried flowers. It's really neat. The first lotuses are neat in that the first day they will open around sunrise, and then they will close by 11 a.m. And the second day around 8 to 1, and then the third day from 11 to 2, and then it will drop its petals. And to keep them blooming throughout the summer, repeat bloom, you do have to fertilize. We just choose not to. Okay, and for those people who thought they had to have a pond to have a lotus, you don't need a pond to have a lotus. You can take a bucket, fill it with water, put it in, dig a hole, like Chris said, dig a hole in the ground, and you can have a lotus. And we've seen these over winter this way. And that's it. There's Water gardens for everyone. Here's an example of whiskey barrels. We have used to use our area for demonstration water gardening, of showing how you can water garden in a bowl with a dwarf lotus, to a 1 gallon container, to a whiskey barrel, or a 5 gallon container, a whiskey barrel, to the hot tub, so that you can use any size container and have some beautiful plants. And the frogs will come, the dragonflies will come, the butterflies will come.
How about mosquitoes?
We have mosquito dunks there. Now, I was saying that I was going to show that soon. Fish do a great job of controlling the mosquito larvae, but in the case of the buckets, we do have fish in those bigger whiskey barrels. We put in goldfish, and that solves it. But for the small buckets that you see, here I was saying, we have a lotus in those small buckets, and they're all different size containers. That's when I tend to use the BT, the mosquito dunks, to keep the larvae. And that's going to become more important this year with the threat of the Zika. So the mosquito dunks. So you can see a size for everybody. And that is a fake heron sculpture that used to be said to help deter, but the heron are very smart. And unless you're going to be out there and constantly moving it so that it looks like it's real, it doesn't work as a deterrent.
Where do you get those whiskey barrels?
Any big store,
Oh, yeah?
store, yeah. Here you can see the water beating off the lotus pad. They're really neat. They now have dwarf, all different sizes of dwarf lotuses. Like I said, there's some that actually can put in a bowl on a table, and this is about 2 to 3 feet, this one. And then here's another dwarf, which has become very popular. They even now have lotuses and water lilies that change color as they mature. The blossoms open in one color and change over to another. And again, I say that these can really take off and become invasive. Take over and take over. And so in wrap up, the key is that clean water equals a very, very happy pond. If you plant it, you build a water garden, everything will come. And here's information on how to contact us with your gardening questions. We're available to answer your gardening questions in person, on the phone, Monday through Friday, 9 to 12, 1 to 4. Email us. There's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's websites. And I've talked about this website. Okay, how am I going to get there? Chris, you want to pull it up? I just want to show you where all this wonderful information on water plants is available in a searchable mode. There it is. Now look at this great website. You can go in and you can look. There's 144 plants listed under water gardens, including 7 which are wildflowers for water gardens. You can search on the top, right? So you can search by the scientific name. You can search by the common name. You can decide that you want to look for things that are 1 foot in height. Whatever parameter you're looking for, to custom tailor plant recommendation of your choice. And if we go to about page 5 on the bottom, there's, like I said, easily 50 to 60 different water lilies with pictures. If we go down the line, can we scroll to page 5? Okay, there we go. Look at this. Isn't this fantastic? And if you click on any one that hits your fancy, Chris, and then you can have all the information about them. On some of the marginal plants, they list information of what's poisonous, what areas of the plant you should avoid. It's just a wealth of information right at your fingertips. And I can play on this for hours. But then I guess we can, available to answering your gardening questions. And just, no one ever leaves any of my events without something in hand. So,
So
With
I
that-
have a question.
Sure.
Why in general does it seem like there's so many aggressive growers in the water world? I mean, any reason? I can't think of a natural reason for that. Why they would be so prolific in, huh?
Survival of the fittest?
But why so, is it just because water is an easier medium for them to expand in, or like a plant that you might plant in your garden, certain percentage is aggressive, but it just seems like a lot of the water plants have the potential for rapid growth.
I think part of it is probably from the amount of nutrients in the water these days, all the nitrogen, the phosphorus from runoff. There's lots of food for them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, just, I don't know, it's just kind of a.
I like the idea of that whiskey barrel with the water lily in it, that's pretty cool. But, and I guess you have to protect it during the winter months here, or?
No, we do nothing. What you saw with the water lilies, they stay as is. Again, we are working only with hardy water lilies. It sits on the deck. Now, some of the lotuses that were in the pots that, I think you saw one with the 1 gallon of white tub, we will take that and actually sink it down into the hot tub.
But the whiskey barrels, you know, we keep a few goldfish in there just to keep the mosquitoes down. And in the wintertime, sitting on the deck, those things will pretty much freeze solid. And you can see it's solid ice. And you'll see the goldfish in there kind of frozen in the ice,
Really?
you know. And a couple of weeks later, when it warms up, thaws out, they're fine.
So you don't do anything at
They're
the
tough.
end, you just leave everything out, you bring the water lettuce, you keep some stuff inside. And then what time of year when do you take it out?
Well, I've been really busy. Normally, everything would have been out by now.
So it's like after the April 15th last frost date, is that sort of?
And I play with it because I'll take a few of the water lettuce and water hyacinths and put them out earlier, like the beginning of April or the end of March if we're in a warm spell, because they being on the surface of the water, unless you have a super, super hard freeze, and I mean, unless it got down in the 20s,
Yeah.
it's gonna do okay. But for the rest of them, I think this afternoon, they're all going out. Everything is going out
So
from
do you do anything to your water? So the whole winter, the pond's pretty bare, right? Or is there stuff out there?
It's pretty bare. I mean,
Okay, so what about the water quality then? It's just, it all gets filtered when you add the plants now?
there's still rootstock in there, and I mean, true, everything's semi-dormant, or some things are totally dormant, some things, but we don't feed the fish.
Yeah.
Fish, you
Also-
stop feeding the fish.
Yeah.
When the water gets really cold, you know, the fish kind of go dormant. They stop eating, so they're not producing a lot of waste. And because they're cold-blooded, they don't need much oxygen or anything.
Yeah.
You know, so we still, for our big ponds, we still keep the pumps going so the waterfalls keep flowing for oxygenation, and that at least keeps a little bit of it open. Even if it does get really cold, you know, most of the pond will ice over. But usually
But we don't even have, aerators in
Yeah.
ours, and everything
Like
just
the
kinda
whiskey barrels, they
slows down.
survive. Nothing.
What do you know about the tree leaves?
Yeah.
I live in a neighborhood that everything blows into my yard.
Well, that's,
We have to keep things netted. One, we use fishing line to keep out the herons from trying to walk in. We also have it crisscrossed on the top to try to keep the hawks and the green herons from flying into our ponds. But we have also found that even that, you need to have additional netting on top, and that works to keep the leaves out of the pond come September and October. So you just do it that. The danger, you can't leave water lettuce or water hyacinths or leaves because it's gonna decay. And then you're gonna have a big water quality mess. And
So
fish
at the
kill.
end of the season, you should take out, once everything's died off, you should take it all out.
Yes, everything that is leaves, water lettuce, water hyacinths, before they start to decay, before the first hard freeze comes. I'd like to encourage you to come up and look at the plants in this one is hornwort and water lettuce. Here's hornwort and anacris. This is a water lettuce, and we have all kinds of other plants for display. And for those of you who don't know how to get a hold of us, here is our card. So call us with your gardening questions. And I also have some other things that might be of interest to you. Since we are, we talked about having decorative plants around your water gardens. And as Chris mentioned, Trish McPherson is going to be talking about pollinators and water-wise gardens. And I have today pollinator seed packs that you can come up and help yourself to some seed packs. So you can plant some pollinator plants around your water gardens or elsewhere in your yard. Also, I happened to find these around. These were very old ones from, it still has our older website, which still rolls to our existing website. And this is a beautiful bookmark with a water lotus, so I ask you, help yourself to it. And I have other information on the Waste, Soil, and Water Conservation District, which is around to help you with your water quality problems. And information on how to do a stream buffer. So lots of good information, how to contact us. Please come up and visit, and we can talk about the different plants here. If you have any questions specifically about algae control, about invasives, about managing wildlife, snakes are the biggest challenge to us because they eat most of our fish, and we have 7 different types that Bill's identified.
Snakes eat your fish.
Oh, yes. And this is an excellent book available for free on USDA Southern Research Station. So it's available for free, and it has a list of, it's great, all types of invasives. In the back is your cheat sheets on invasive aquatics. So I encourage you can get copies of that. We have a few in our Master Gardener office. And I don't know, NC State also has this good publication on water gardens and weeds. So lots of information. And I'm here to answer your questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, that was great.